It is our last full day in Cuba, and I have hardly vlogged at all, but I do have a lot I want to say about this trip. So I think what I'll do is I will do a full recap when I get back to Toronto, and I'll insert the clips as I talk about the trip. Hubby and I had a wonderful time, but we are so excited to be going home tomorrow. We miss Lulu so much. And while it's beautiful here and such a joy to be on vacation, very, very grateful for this holiday, I'm eager to get back to my usual routine. So I will see you back in Toronto with a full recap. This was our first trip away since before the pandemic, and hubby and I both agreed that we wanted something easy and not too far from home. We decided to book an all-inclusive vacation to Varadero, Cuba. We've never been to Cuba before, but we have done all-inclusive, albeit in our 20s. This was an ideal trip for me in terms of ease because it was a 3.5-hour flight and I didn't have to plan anything aside from booking the vacation itself, which included accommodations, the flight, airport transfers, as well as food and beverage. We decided to stay at Iberostar Playa, Alameda. This is categorized as a 5-star hotel by standards within Cuba. If you've been to Cuba before, or if you've done any research on travel destinations down south, you'll know that the Cuba standards are a little bit lower. So a 5-star hotel in Cuba is more on par with a 3-star hotel. While we haven't been to Cuba before, we had done a lot of research both in our 20s and now, and we knew about the distinction. We've always been curious about Cuba because we've heard so much about it, so we decided to go ahead and see for ourselves what it was like. The bonus is that all-inclusive packages in Cuba are a lot cheaper than other destinations for the reasons that I talked about. One topic that always comes up when I read reviews about resorts in Cuba is food. So there are rave reviews saying the food is great, and there are also very negative reviews or rants about the food being terrible. Of course, there are a lot of reviews that are in the middle saying that the food isn't great, but it's definitely fine. And hubby and I fall somewhere in the middle. Of course, the food isn't the same as what we're used to here. There are a lot of shortages in Cuba. Cuba is still a developing country, and the people cooking at the resorts are making tons of food to feed a lot of people 3 times a day, buffet style. So I think it's important to keep your expectations in check. That being said, hubby and I ate very well when we were there. There was plenty that we enjoyed eating. Some of my favorite things included pasta from the pasta station where you could pick the ingredients that you wanted. I tended to get tomatoes and capers in red sauce with penne. The other thing I ate a lot of were little sandwiches. They had tons of little buns. They had them at every meal, so I would just slice them in half and I would put salami and sliced cheese inside. Super duper delicious, and I eat a lot of sandwiches on the regular. I love salami. On the days where we weren't eating at the restaurant, I would pack a little sandwich for myself so that I wouldn't be hungry later, and it was perfect. The only thing is I wish I had brought like a little Tupperware because you're not allowed to take dishes out of the restaurant, and I don't really like wasting napkins because of all of the shortages. So having a little Tupperware would have been very handy just to pack some snacks for the pool or for the beach. The other thing I want to mention that is a little bit on the more negative side is that our room, although it was spacious and it was for the most part quite clean, it was very dated and it also had a musty scent. Also, because we were in a tropical destination, of course the humidity is higher. Our towels didn't dry out completely, so it was really handy to have a little patio outside with 2 chairs where we could put our towels out to dry. Some of the linens did have little stains on them and also a little bit of a wet towel scent, but we were only there for a week, so it was totally fine. I just want to give an honest review of the room, so you don't expect too much if you decide to do all-inclusive in Cuba. Overall though, what a luxury it was to not have to cook or clean for an entire week. That was such a treat. I want to talk about what I loved about the resort. The grounds. The grounds were beautiful. Just the landscaping and the way our accommodations were laid out. Some of the resorts in Cuba have their accommodations laid out in large buildings, but our resort had little buildings of 3 stories interspersed throughout the property, and this was just the perfect fit for us. We really loved that vibe. We split our time pretty equally between the pool and the beach. The pool for the convenience being close to everything, and it was also less windy. We went on a really windy week, and the beach was beautiful because, I mean, it's the beach. That was the other thing that I really loved about our resort. The beachfront location was perfect, and we got a section of the beach that I thought was really nice. The beach in Varadero is the main attraction. It goes on forever. One day we walked along the beach for 45 minutes in one direction and it still kept going. And then on another day we walked in the other direction and we were able to walk around 30 minutes before it turned a little bit rocky, but it would have been nice to see what lay beyond the rocks as well. My favorite time at the resort was definitely spent on the beach. Now, Hubby and I talked about staying at the resort for our entire vacation and having a true beach vacation. We were open to excursions, but there wasn't a lot of information online and we weren't bringing that much cash with us. The currency situation in Cuba is quite convoluted and we didn't know who would take credit cards. So we went into this trip being open to doing excursions, but also being open to not doing excursions. Knowing me, I have a hard time sitting still, and beach vacations aren't really my jam. I do love the beach, but I can only take so much of it before I get really bored. So I was really happy to see that they did accept credit card, and we ended up booking 2 excursions, and we also did a kind of like self-guided thing on a 3rd day. This happened to be really similar to our pattern in our 20s when we did a series of all-inclusive vacations. We tend to stay on the resort for about half the time and we do 2 or 3 excursions. Hi everyone, we are in Varadero, Cuba. We've been here for a couple of days now and this is the first time I'm talking to the camera, which is a bit unusual for me. I needed a couple of days just to like settle in. Hubby and I are missing Lulu a lot and she was having some issues with her tummy, and so I was a bit worried about her and not really in the mood to vlog, although I did do a lot of clips. It is beautiful here. This is our 2nd full day. We spent our first full day at the resort just checking it out, spent a lot of time on the beach, much more time than I've ever really spent on the beach. Sometimes it's just like a little bit too hot for me, but yesterday it was not that hot. It was very windy and it was overcast / partly cloudy, so it made our stay on the beach very easy, and we spent a good, I think, like 6-7 hours on the beach. So today we took the hop on hop off bus to Varadero proper, or I guess like downtown Varadero. Very touristy area, but it's nice to be off the resort and seeing some shops and restaurants. We're walking to the flea market now. We're almost there. I think it's probably another 20 minutes or so. And then we're gonna grab the hop on hop off bus and head back to the hotel, maybe take a dip in the pool. spent our last day in Cuba on the beach, and it was actually a pretty cool day, very windy, but the sun was out, and because it wasn't too hot, I was fine to spend almost the entire day on the beach. It had poured rain a couple of afternoons earlier. The rains only lasted for a few hours, but it really came down and it was very windy and a little bit chilly as well. Still not cold in the grand scheme of things, but I needed like a scarf or sweater when I stepped outside. I think because of the downpour and also the wind, there were a bunch of what I thought were jellyfish that washed up on the beach. Hubby and I were looking at one for a long time. It's a really beautiful creature. A gentleman came up and told us that it was actually a Portuguese man-o'-war, and they are technically not jellyfish. They are such fascinating creatures that I read up about them quite a bit when we got back to Toronto. That was basically our trip to Cuba. Cuba is a beautiful country. It is very interesting in terms of history. I knew a little bit about the country before, but I find going somewhere just piques my curiosity so much more, and I've learned a lot about Cuba since then. I would go back, but hubby and I decided on this trip that we're not going to travel without Lulu anymore. If we do travel, we're gonna bring her with us, and we'll probably stay within Canada, do short flights or road trips. That's the option that fits the best with our desires and our lifestyle right now. Hubby and I aren't really in the same place that we were many years ago when we were traveling very frequently. We both still enjoy travel. The trip was awesome. We had a really good time, but we don't crave travel anymore. It's really only if we have time off and we don't know what else to do, then we'll book a trip. It's kind of like the last resort now, whereas before, in particular, I was like super keen on traveling, mostly because it was a form of escapism for me. That is going to be it for my unconventional Cuba vlog. I know it was a lot of me talking at home, but I hope you enjoyed the footage that I included. I would recommend a trip there just because of its history and the people there, how much you can learn and how much you can open your mind when you're there, with of course expectations in check about the accommodations and the food. If you can find a newer resort, I think that would take care of the accommodation issue because everything will be brand new, but the food might still be mediocre or not as good as you're used to. But if you keep that expectation in check, you can have a really wonderful time in Cuba. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you in the next vlog. Bye!